My wife leaned into my ear, her grip on my arm like a steel vise. "Grab your coat. We are leaving right now. Don't look at him." I thought maybe the champagne had gone to her head, or perhaps the stress of the evening was too much, but then she dragged me toward the exit, locked the car doors the moment we were inside, and held up a tablet with trembling hands. She whispered, "Look at this." What I saw left me frozen. My son wasn't just celebrating my milestone, he was counting down the minutes to my death. But before I tell you how a father survives his own child, I need to know, where are you listening from? Comment your city below. Your support helps spread this warning to families who think they are safe. Now let me take you back to where the nightmare began. The Skyline Ballroom in Seattle was a sea of tuxedos and emerald gowns. It was my 70th birthday, and the banner above the stage read Elias Thorne, 7 decades of industry. After 40 years building Thorne Logistics into a global freight empire worth over $25 million, I was supposed to be basking in the glow of my legacy. Instead, I felt a strange rhythmic thumping in my temples. The room swayed slightly, a sensation I'd grown accustomed to over the last 8 months. Julian, my only son, appeared at my elbow. He was 40 years old, handsome in a way that usually charmed investors, but tonight his smile didn't reach his eyes. "You need to hydrate, Dad," he said, handing me a glass of water. "You're flushing. Take it easy, okay?" He adjusted my tie, his touch lingering a moment too long. "We need you around for a long time," I thanked him, feeling a surge of gratitude for his constant attention to my declining health. He had been so diligent lately, always checking my pulse, always ensuring I took my supplements. I took a sip, not knowing I was drinking from the hands of a traitor. Across the room, Martha stood near the heavy velvet curtains. My wife of 45 years usually thrived at these events. She was the social backbone of our family. But tonight, she looked like a ghost. Her skin was ashen, and she was watching Julian with an expression I couldn't place. Was it disgust? Fear? She hadn't spoken a word to him all night, which was unlike her. I made my way toward her, navigating through handshakes from board members and old rivals. When I finally reached her, the air around her felt cold. She didn't smile. She didn't wish me a happy birthday. She simply scanned the room, eyes darting toward the exits as if we were under siege. "Elias," she said, her voice dropping to a frequency only I could hear, "the car is brought around. We have a medical emergency." I frowned. "I feel dizzy, Martha, but I don't think—" She cut me off. "Not a medical emergency, a survival emergency. Move." We drove in silence, the rain of the Pacific Northwest hammering against the roof of our sedan. Martha drove like a woman possessed, weaving through the downtown traffic until we reached the safety of our private underground garage. The silence in the car was heavy, suffocating. My head was still spinning, the dizziness coming in waves that made me nauseous. When she killed the engine, she didn't get out. She reached into her purse and pulled out an iPad. It belonged to Julian. He had left it at our lake house the previous weekend, and he'd been frantic to get it back. "I cracked his passcode," Martha said, her voice breaking for the first time. "I wish I hadn't, but you need to see who your son really is." She shoved the device into my hands. The screen was open to an encrypted messaging app. The contact name was simply The Chemist. I stared at the glowing screen, my eyes struggling to focus. The thread went back 8 months. It started with mundane questions about heart rates and blood pressure medication interactions. Then it turned dark. "Subject is showing signs of fatigue," Julian had written in February. "How long until the liver enzymes spike?" The reply from the chemist, a man later identified as Ian, a disgraced pharmacist, was clinical and cold. "Patience. The herbal blend masks the accumulation. It mimics natural cardiac decline. If you rush it, the autopsy will pick it up. Stick to the Sunday schedule." I scrolled down, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from poison, but from grief. Julian, the boy I taught to sail, the man I handed a VP title to, was discussing my murder like a logistics problem. He was tracking my decline on a spreadsheet attached to the chat. "Read the last one," Martha whispered, tears finally spilling onto her cheeks. "Sent 2 hours ago." I looked at the bottom of the screen. The timestamp was 6:45 p.m., right before the party started. Julian wrote, "Tonight is the night. The dose in his toast will tip the scale. By midnight, it'll look like a stroke brought on by excitement. Get the paperwork ready for the transfer." The response from Ian was a single thumbs-up emoji. The callousness of it made me retch. My son wasn't just waiting for me to die. He was orchestrating it to happen in front of 200 witnesses so he could play the grieving heir. The glass of water he handed me and the specific toast he had insisted on giving later. It was all a script, and I was the prop that needed to be discarded. "How?" I croaked, the words scraping my throat. "How did you know to look?" Martha wiped her face, her expression hardening into something fierce. "He was too anxious about this tablet. Last Sunday, when he left it at the cabin, he called me 6 times in an hour. He was sweating, Elias. Panic, not normal annoyance." She continued, "I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried his anniversary. Nothing. Then I tried the date he asked it for that $2.5 million loan you refused him." The code worked. Martha had spent the last 3 days reading the archive of hate our son had built. "I didn't want to believe it," she sobbed. "I wanted to be wrong. I waited until tonight to be sure, hoping he wouldn't go through with the final step. But when I saw him near the drinks, I knew." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The heart health powder. Every Sunday for the last 8 months, Julian came over for brunch. He brought a canister of an expensive organic supplement blend he swore by. "It's for your longevity, Dad," he'd say, mixing it into my smoothie himself. "I want you around to see your grandkids grow up." He wasn't extending my life. He was harvesting it, the dizziness, the brain fog, the tremors in my hands. It wasn't age. It wasn't the stress of work. It was thallium or arsenic or whatever devil's brew Ian had cooked up, administered by the hand of my own flesh and blood. He had looked me in the eye week after week and smiled while he poisoned me. The betrayal was so absolute it felt like my chest was caving in. "We are going to the hospital," Martha stated, starting the car again. "Not the one Julian recommends. We're going to University Hospital. Dr. Harris is on call." I checked. I nodded, too weak to argue. The drive to the emergency room was a blur of neon lights and rain. I kept looking at my hands, wondering how much of the time was coursing through my veins right now. When we arrived, Martha didn't hold back. She demanded a full toxicology screen, specifically referencing heavy metals and synthetic cardiac disruptors. The triage nurse looked skeptical until I collapsed in the waiting room chair, the room spinning violently. My body was shutting down. The final dose Julian mentioned might not have been consumed yet, but the cumulative effect was bringing me to the edge of the cliff. Hours later, Dr. Harris walked into my private room. He was a stern man, efficient and blunt. He held a clipboard with a grim expression. "Mr. Thorne, your wife's intuition saved your life. You have dangerously high levels of a digitalis derivative in your system. It builds up slowly, weakening the heart muscle until a final trigger causes massive arrest." "How much time?" I asked, my voice steady despite the IVs in my arm. "Without treatment, maybe 2 weeks. With the dose your wife describes him planning for tonight, you wouldn't have woken up tomorrow." He looked at us over his glasses. "I'm required to report this to the police. This isn't an accidental overdose. This is precise, calculated administration." Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, the sadness evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard rage. It started in my gut and spread outward, burning away the fear. Julian wanted my money. He wanted the company. He wanted to clear his gambling debts I'd refused to pay because I wanted him to learn responsibility. He had decided that my life was worth less than his comfort. I looked at Martha, sleeping uncomfortably in the chair next to me. She had saved me. Now I had to save us. I wasn't going to just let the police pick him up. That was too easy. He needed to be exposed. He needed to understand that he hadn't just failed. He had picked a fight with the man who built an empire from nothing. By Tuesday, I was discharged, secretly moved to a hotel suite downtown, and we told no one. I called Silas, my personal attorney, and a man who could scare sharks out of the water. We met in the hotel room, the curtains drawn. Silas listened to the timeline, reviewed the screenshots Martha had taken, and read the toxicology report. "We have enough for an arrest," Silas said, rubbing his chin. "But if you want a conviction that sticks, one that ensures Vanessa goes down too, we need them to admit it. We need the smoking gun on tape." Silas introduced us to Detective Brogan, a retired officer now working private security. "We set a trap," Brogan suggested. "A celebration. Tell him you're feeling better. Tell them you've made a decision about the will. The investigation into my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, brought up skeletons we never knew existed. Brogan had done a deep dive. Vanessa wasn't just a high-maintenance socialite. She was a widow. Her first husband, a tech developer in Portland, had died 5 years ago. A hiking accident where he fell from a ridge. She inherited a modest fortune then, which she burned through in 2 years. Now she was pushing Julian. The text revealed she was the architect. She was the one pressuring Julian about the timeline, telling him to be a man and finish it. Julian was the weapon, but Vanessa was the hand aiming it. She was a black widow, and she had spun her web around my foolish, greedy son. The plan was set for Friday, a private family dinner at our estate. Just the four of us. Brogan's team went in on Thursday while the house was empty. They installed pinhole cameras in the dining room chandelier, the kitchen backsplash, and even the study. Audio sensors were placed in the flower arrangements. We were turning my home into a stage for their downfall. I sat in the surveillance van with Brogan, watching the feed test. The clarity was terrifying. I could see the grain of the wood on the dining table. If they try anything, Brogan said, tapping the screen, we'll have it in 4K. And I have a medic team on standby in the guest house. You won't actually ingest anything. I made the call on Wednesday morning. My hands didn't shake. I dialed Julian's number. He answered on the first ring, sounding wary. Dad, where have you been? We've been worried sick. You disappeared from the party. I know, son, I lied, my voice sounding frail but optimistic. I had a spell. Went to a private clinic to rest, but it gave me clarity. I realized I can't hold on to the reins forever. I want you and Vanessa to come over Friday for dinner. I have paperwork drawn up. I'm transferring the controlling shares to you immediately. The silence on the other end was heavy with greed. Really, Dad? He asked, his voice brightening. That's great. We'll be there. Friday arrived with a gray, oppressive sky. Martha spent the afternoon cooking. She made roast lamb, Julian's favorite. The scent filled the house, a cruel reminder of the happy memories we once shared here. I sat in my study, a glass of amber liquid on my desk, untouched. I felt like an actor preparing for the final act of a tragedy. I checked my earpiece. Brogan was listening. They just pulled through the gates. Brogan's voice crackled in my ear. Showtime, Elias. I stood up, buttoned my cardigan, and prepared to welcome my murderers. The doorbell rang at 7 p.m. sharp. Julian walked in carrying a bottle of vintage wine. Vanessa was wearing a red dress, looking victorious. She hugged me, the scent of her expensive perfume cloying and suffocating. You look rested, Elias, she lied. I looked like a man who had lost 10 pounds in a week, but she only saw the dollar signs hovering over my head. I feel new, I said, leading them to the living room. This week has been a revelation. Julian poured the wine he brought. To the future, he said, handing me a glass. I took it. The camera in the bookshelf zoomed in. I didn't drink. I just held it, letting the light catch the deep red liquid. To family, I corrected, and what we do for them. Dinner was a tense affair. I spoke about my legacy, about how hard I worked to build the logistics network. I watched them exchange glances, impatient, hungry glances. Finally, I dropped the bait. The papers are in the study. But first, Julian, make me that special tea of yours. My stomach is settling. Julian's eyes lit up. Of course, Dad. He went to the kitchen. Vanessa stayed with me. He's such a good son, she purred. I watched the monitor on my hidden phone under the table. In the kitchen, Julian wasn't using the canister he usually brought. He pulled a small paper packet from his pocket. He dumped the white powder into the steaming mug, stirred it vigorously, and then threw the packet into the trash compactor. Got him, Brogan whispered in my ear. Julian returned, smiling, holding the mug with both hands. Here you go. Best thing for digestion. He set it down in front of me. The steam rose up, carrying death with it. I looked at the mug, then at Julian. You know, I said softly, I read an interesting article about digitalis toxicity today. The color drained from Julian's face instantly. Vanessa froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. What? Julian stammered. It's just herbs, Dad. Is it? I asked, my voice turning to steel. Or is it the final dose Ian gave you, the one to mimic a stroke? Julian stood up, knocking his chair over. Who told you? Sit down, I roared, slamming my hand on the table. At that signal, the kitchen doors burst open. Detective Brogan and two uniformed officers stepped in. "Police! Hands where we can see them." The chaos was immediate. Vanessa screamed, trying to run for the patio doors, but an officer blocked her path. Julian collapsed back into his chair, weeping. He didn't even try to fight. He just folded. When they handcuffed him, he looked at me with the eyes of a frightened child. "She made me do it," he sobbed, pointing at Vanessa. "She said we'd lose the house. She said you were old anyway." I stood over him, looking down at the son I had raised. "I would have given you anything, Julian. If you had asked for help, I would have given it. But you didn't want help. You wanted my grave." Vanessa was spitting curses as they dragged her out. Her mask of sophistication completely shattered. She screamed that I was a stubborn old fool who should have died months ago. The trial was swift. The video evidence was irrefutable. The text messages, the toxicology report, and the packet recovered from the trash compactor sealed their fate. Vanessa turned on Julian, Julian turned on Vanessa, and they both destroyed each other in open court. Julian was sentenced to 25 years. Vanessa got 30, thanks to the reopened investigation into her first husband's death in Portland. Martha and I sold the estate. It felt too big, too empty. We moved to a smaller place on the coast overlooking the ocean. I'm 71 now. My health has returned mostly, though my heart will always carry a scar, not from the poison, but from the betrayal. We spend our days volunteering and helping others spot the signs of elder financial abuse. It's a quiet life, but it's ours, and it's safe. Thank you for listening to my story. If you stuck around until the end, you are the reason I share this. Please trust your gut, protect your loved ones, and never ignore the red flags. God bless you all.